Going live in 1 minute.
Good evening. Call to order a regular meeting for the normal town council for Tuesday, September 8th, 2020. Please call the roll.
Mayor, I'm going to ask you to hold on for one moment. Ms. Gadaraj said we needed 1 more minute, so I'm going to ask if we can get an affirmation from her that we're ready to go.
She actually just gave me confirmation.
Oh, okay. I thought she said 1 minute. Okay.
We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Oh, shall I call the roll first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Call the roll.
Mayor Coos,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy,
Here.
Ms. Cummings,
Here.
Mr. Nord,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Here we go. The governor has issued a disaster declaration related to the public health concerns caused by the statewide COVID-19 pandemic. As mayor, I've determined that an in-person meeting is not practical or prudent because of the risk of exposure to the COVID-19 virus stemming from an indoor gathering, and that a remote meeting is in the best interest of the health, safety, and welfare of the council, the staff, and the general public. We go to public comment. We have one gentleman in the waiting room for public comment. If you would bring that person in.
I have admitted the public.
We have Patrick Dullard. Are you there, Mr. Dullard? I think you just went live, Mr. Dullard. Is that accurate?
You might be muted, Mayor.
Hey,
There we go.
hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
We've got you now.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Patrick Dullard from Friends of the Constitution Trail. Just briefly calling to support the omnibus item to approve funding for the Eagle Landing project. As you all know, this project's been on the books for several years, was really close to being implemented about 5 years ago, and then got held up in the budget impasse with the state of Illinois. So we're glad to see it moving forward. And as you can expect, the Friends of the Constitution Trail firmly support this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. We move to the omnibus agenda. Items considered routine and will be handled with one vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. And my Zoom is acting up here. Bear with me for a moment. Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to pull item B, item C, and item D from the agenda.
Thank you. And in the order of hands coming up, Mr. Nord.
Nope, I don't have any.
Mr. Preston.
Nope, Mr. McCarthy got mine. I was going for C.
Ms. Lorenz.
I was going for the water main. Was that E or D?
E.
E.
Item E.
So has that already been pulled?
Item E has not been pulled.
Okay. Well, so I'd like to pull item E, which is the water main out to towards the Rivian area.
Please call the roll. The item we're approving is approval minutes of the regular meeting of the council meeting for August 17th.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank you.
Point of order. Are we also approving item B?
Item D was pulled.
B as in boy.
I pulled
Item
it.
B was pulled.
Okay, thank you.
Ready for the roll?
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the minutes are approved. Item B is a report to receive and file town normal expenditures for payment as of, don't ask me where that came from. Report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of September 2nd, 2020.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you. Just to review what this action is. What this is, for all those who are listening, it's essentially the council voting to put into the public record the town checkbook for transparency purposes. What's included in this is an accounting of town bills that were previously authorized during the budget process, and large expenditures that went through a separate individual council process. These funds have already been paid. They're not upcoming, but this is simply accounting of the checkbook of what's already been paid. So both categories of expenditures have previously been subject to either the budget process and thereby authorized, or an independent council review. Both processes had plenty of opportunity for discussion on whether or not to move forward or not, process discussions and the like. And so tonight, again, the purpose of this is simply to put it into the public record, not go and hash through previous process, either the process that was gone through in the budget cycle that we have coming up before too terribly long, and or to rehash previous council decisions, but merely for transparency's sake, so the public can see, here's the public checkbook, here's how the money's being spent.
Thank you. Seeing no hands, please call the roll.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The report to receive and file is approved. Item C is a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing the purchase of 7 Otterbein industrial aerators from MTI Distributing in the amount of $61,893.16. Mr. McCarthy.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. So what we have tonight is, if I'm understanding it correctly, and I'll probably ask Mr. Damry to weigh in if he's the appropriate staff member. We bought these last year and we went through a vetting process, and we're buying the same product as I understand it. I'm assuming this product is performing well, and that's why we're going back to this particular product, and that there's a specific distribution network or person who we buy these things through. Can I get some clarification on that?
Yes, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. Damry is on the call, so I'll ask him to unmute himself and we'll answer your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah, that is correct. We actually, when we started to look toward doing these, the aeration projects to provide a healthier water environment in our stormwater ponds, we did some research We also, these are also put into the golf course lakes as well. And we did some research and we put out for quotes to get number of quotes, and we got 3 quotes in, and we were able to choose MTI, which was not only the best service as far as reputation goes from what we heard, but also the lowest bid. So we moved forward with that purchase to do the golf course in 2018. And then last year we presented the Park West and the West Pond off Northtown, and did those 2 last year, which was approved last year in May, I believe.
And all of those are using the same equipment, which standardizes, because we are the ones who perform maintenance on that equipment.
Correct. Yeah. So everything's working really well. We're really happy with the product. We obviously want to keep consistency in parts, service, all those sorts of things. So that's why we went ahead and moved forward with proposing the 7 fountains for this, the East Lake off Northtown, Northtown, and move forward, proposing to move forward without going through the formal bid process, as we've essentially done that twice here, although not the sealed bid, but treated it as such. We got 3 quotes without knowledge of each other, gave them same specs, same parameters of what we're looking for and so forth, and we were able to get similar products and pricing, and chose the low bid.
So we got good pricing on a product that we have been using for several years, and it's working.
Yep.
And it sounds like, if I heard you right, probably some economies of scale of parts, accessories, because you guys are servicing themselves.
Yeah.
So then I guess I didn't read it this way, but maybe I'm understanding it a little differently. So this is a maintenance type of thing for our water retention ponds and the like. Am I hearing that, or am I reading something differently into this?
Yes. So there's a lot of algae buildup, and also the algae over the last couple of years, we've had a couple scenarios where the algae had basically the weather conditions allowed for that algae. It's kind of a complicated process, but basically the way it was described to us, there's a kill of the algae or certain plankton that takes away all the oxygen out of the lakes, creates a fish kill. So we had a pretty significant fish kill in both the East Lake and the West Lake the past 2 years. And so, it just will control the algae. So we won't have that dirtying the water, provide a better fish and wildlife and habitat, and just have cleaner and better water quality.
Gotcha. So this is preventative. We're trying to keep these
Very much so.
ponds in good shape, and you did some price investigation, and we're having good experience with the equipment, and there's some economies of scale. Okay, that helps me a lot. Thank you very much.
Correct. Yep.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. This is an issue that I have heard a lot about from residents, primarily in Ironwood, and I would just like to take this opportunity to say, one, how appreciative I have heard residents are who live on or around the West Pond in Ironwood that did get these aerators last year, to Mr. Damery and to your staff for not only doing those, but also maintaining them and keeping up with them. That has made a tremendous difference to residents. And then others who I've heard from, there was a lot of discussion, as Mr. Damery knows well, and plenty of others last year with the scope of the fish kill that ended up happening in the East Pond. Doing this here tonight, I think is a good move that will make a big difference. So thanks, Mr. Damery and Ms. Reese and staff for fixing this issue that has been going on, I think, for a long time, and that residents have been talking about for quite some time. So thanks for doing this.
Yep.
And Mr. Miller.
Thank you. I'm kind of new to this because I didn't know that we had fish kills up there. Did we have these 2 years in a row? Is that what I heard, Mr. Damery?
Yeah, in 2017, we had a fish kill on the West Lake off Northtown. Pretty, it was significant, but pretty easy to handle from our standpoint. And by handle, I mean, we getting out there and actually with fish nets and such and cleaning up everything that had floated to the top. So, and disposing. So, yeah, so we had to do that in the West Pond. And as a result of that, we had prioritized smaller ponds first because those are the ones that we thought that this would be more likely to happen to. We reorganized our priority and moved to the West Pond, or West Lake, I'm sorry, and deferred on doing the East Lake because of the fact that we thought that one would be fine. Well, last Labor Day, actually, it happened, and it was a very, very significant fish kill, unfortunately. And so we were out there and had to clean up and take care of that as well. So we that's why we've moved this one forward as well, ahead of a couple other lake stormwater ponds.
But the kills, they were in 2 different ponds. It's not like it was the same pond over and over.
Correct. Yes.
Correct.
Correct.
Okay. Then that's interesting. Whenever you bid this out, did you contact the chamber or the EDC to see if there's a vendor that sells this product locally? Because as Mr. McCarthy mentioned in the previous meeting, if we need to spend the money, we should buy local.
We did, as we did the research to identify what exactly we were going to be doing in these lakes, because we weren't sure exactly what product to even use. We looked into a number of different things, bubblers that would be underwater and just oxygenating underneath the surface versus the fountains that we ended up purchasing and a couple other options. And with that, we looked for a variety of vendors throughout. I can't say we specifically called EDC or anybody like that to ask if there were any local vendors, but we were reaching out to our local, the IDNR rep, as well as our representative from the, whoever treats our algae, and I can't remember the name off the top of my head here right now, but we talked to them and they referred us to certain companies. And so that's how we ended up with the vendors we ended up with.
And I would jump in and say that we get sales calls all the time. So if someone is in the business locally of selling these type of aeration equipment, it's certainly public information that we have a golf course and we have detention ponds. Ordinarily, people are calling us. So we don't historically call the chamber or EDC when we have particular items that we're out searching for. So in this particular instance, as Mr. Damery indicated, the original purchase of Otterbein was a couple years ago. We did buy some more last year, and then this year we did get quotes, and it turned out to be the same vendor that had the lowest price.
Okay, I would like to make it a practice, or I would recommend making it a practice that staff does contact the EDC and the chamber to find out if there are vendors, because it's perfectly reasonable to assume that the town would not know all the vendors that are in our town, and the EDC and chamber would probably be more in the know. And also, an example, not too long ago, the town had bought, this department had bought a lot of golf carts, and they did not go with, or they did not reach out to the local vendor that sold golf carts as well. So, that's something else. Well, that's another reason why I would say let's reach out. Now, another question that I have, not on the purchasing.
Before we get off that, I'm sorry, Mr. Norb, before we get off that, can I ask for clearer definition then? Because this has come up a couple of times, and we're $130+ million operation. So is there a price threshold that you're suggesting we call Chamber of Commerce every time we make an acquisition? Is there a certain price threshold that we could agree upon? Because it is a little more definition would be easier on staff time, I think, if we knew what we are looking for in terms of calling the Chamber of Commerce and frankly Economic Development Council. I don't know if that's an effective use of their time to have municipalities call them to find out vendors, but I guess I'm just seeking direction from council in this regard.
Sure. So then my recommendation, since I've talked with both the chamber and EDC and have mentioned this to them, that I think this would be a great policy and that it needs to be something that the chamber and EDC and the business community police, that it's not something that I should be policing. I would recommend you reach out to the leaders there and
I
discuss
have.
with them
I
what a good dollar amount is.
Okay,
Because-
I'll bring that up again with them and I'll ask for a specific dollar amount of something within reason. And then I'll report back to council, because what we're talking about is town staff time, chamber staff time, and EDC staff time. And we need to all understand some parameters on this.
Sure, and just understand, all that staff time is paid by our local businesses. So keeping the money in the community is paramount. Now, for another question is,
Local business, local normal businesses that you're referring to, or local McLean County businesses?
local McLean County businesses.
Saving money for the normal residents, are you referring to just normal businesses?
No, McLean County,
Thank you.
you know.
So I'm sorry to still harp on the subject, but for direction, does council want us to come back with a complete revision of our procurement policy? Because we have a policy that we operate by. And if we are going to make acquisitions contingent upon calling Bloomington Normal vendors for purchases, we'll draft a policy as such, if that's how council would like to proceed.
Point of order.
This is only a recommendation. We are moving on to
Point of
something
order.
else that's not related.
Point of order,
Yeah,
Mayor.
point of order, Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, so clearly we've gone way far afield of the subject matter. And I'd ask that we bring it back to the actual conversation about the actual item on the agenda. If Mr. Nord has some concept of a change to the procurement policy, that's a separate matter altogether. By all means, bring that up with staff. But during the business meeting on a proposal talking about an individual purchase is not the time to rehash the entire procurement process or give directions of change in the procurement process. So can we please get back to the topic?
Yes, and I'd just like the record to show that I just asked the questions. And then another question is, was the DNR brought in when we had these fish kills? And did they say that having aerators would have prevented them?
We actually talked to microbiology, our algae treatment vendor. We also talked to IDNR, and we also talked to the EPA to make sure that everything, and we notified everybody that was necessary to, and yes, I mean, that was kind of the recommendation, is if we can aerate these shallow ponds, and that's one reason why it's such an issue. These ponds really aren't that deep. And so if they were deeper, there would be better oxygenation. So that's why we're having to put fountains in to kind of move that water. So yes,
Sure.
that was the recommendation.
All right, because I grew up and we've got quite a few ponds that I've grown up with, and Mother Nature has put many ponds throughout, the globe that do not need aeration. So there's lots of different reasons, and getting the experts in so that way we're just not putting aeration when the problem could be something else, like you have herbicide going in there and it kills all your algae, and or there's periods of no sunlight where then you don't have the oxygenation, and then at night you get your fish kills. So that's why bringing the experts, because there's a whole lot of different things. And if it's a repeat thing, then it may be some other maintenance thing that is causing it, which is why I asked if we brought the experts in. But
Yeah.
Thank you.
We did each time, yes. I'd also say that, as far as the research, we did quite a bit of research to try to identify a number of vendors to make sure that we not only knew that we were getting the best price or the right vendor, but we were trying to identify the right product. So we really reached out pretty far and wide just to even identify, who would be potentially getting quotes from. So I just want to kind of add that in too.
Ms. Lorenz?
Thank you. I was going to start out by simply saying that I think this is a great improvement, and I'm kind of surprised to hear that maybe, somebody didn't know about this as an issue, even within the last year. If you live anywhere up in North Normal, it was pretty common for people up this way to be complaining and, literally stop me on the street about it. So the situation that was about a year ago, I remember being quite something that was talked about quite a bit. So I was ecstatic actually when I saw this, and, listen up, those of you who live on the east side of Ironwood, because this was really going to benefit you as a taxpayer. So, that's my good news that I want to share. But then as the conversation proceeded here, I really just feel compelled to say that, checking with EDC on a matter like this is way out of their wheelhouse. They're experts on a lot of things, but this would not be a good use of their time. I'm not sure that Chamber would be an expert in this area either. They're going to be most familiar with those who are Chamber members, and that isn't always everybody. And quite frankly, from what I'm hearing from Mr. Damery, the staff really did a pretty outstanding job of scouring the landscape for who to talk to and the experts to consult with. So I would think that our experts are sitting right in front of us here. Those of you who deal with this.
Point of order. This is deviating from the conversation. Mr. McCarthy had a point of order for the exact same conversation.
And I'm just saying that I feel that compelled to right a wrong here, which is to say that EDC is not where I would like to see staff go. Chamber is not where I'd like to see staff go on this. You have repeatedly brought up procurement policies over and over and over. And I find it rather hypocritical that you would call a point of order on the very issue that you continue to bring up. So that is why I'm finding myself saying something on a negative now, because really what is important here and what I don't want to have lost in this is a good thing for taxpayers of this community. Thank you.
Seeing no more hands raised, please call the roll.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. Mr. Nord, could you lower your hand and we'll move on to the next one? Thank you. Item D is a resolution to accept bids and award a contract to H.J. Epple and Company for the construction of the Eagles Landing multi-use trail project in the amount of $280,736.15. Mr. McCarthy.
Move approval.
Second.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Well, Mr. Dullard stole a little of my conversation. I was glad to see our nonprofit Uber Trail supporting local agency coming on in support of this project. And just to extend a little of what he said, this segment has been on the planning block for a number of years now. I was happy to see a bit of the staff report talk about lack of sidewalks, lack of access, school to school difficulty, that there isn't really a safe route. And if you've spent any time out there walking, riding your bike or anything, you'll know that to be true. I tend to get out there quite a bit. And so there's not really a great safe route. And also remind everybody that in the over 10 years of bike ped planning, part of that support that we've so far shown for the bike ped plan, what was also in that plan was new neighborhoods connecting to existing trail infrastructure when those new neighborhoods are reasonably adjacent to a trail, which this neighborhood is. And it's also adjacent to 2 schools, even more importantly, to get this done. And one of the things I'm most excited, I'm always happy to see trail extension our Constitution Trail is just so beloved throughout McLean County by residents universally. But I'm very excited about this one because the construction is being paid for by a grant. So it's not coming out of taxpayer pocket, which I'm even more thrilled about. I pulled this to talk about us and remind us of our bike and pedestrian planning history, the framework of the plan, neighborhoods like this to get them connected to existing trail infrastructure when it's adjacent to those neighborhoods. And that this project has in fact been on the books for quite a while in the planning phases, and we have the opportunity and some grant dollars to get it done. Thank you to staff for staying on top of this, staying on top of that grant. I know it's been a long, patient process to get those grant funds that were promised long ago, and this plan was done long ago. But thank you for sticking with it and seeing it through to fruition and bringing our tax dollars back to our community to do good things in our community. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Thank you. And not to completely contradict a fellow council member, but it is tax dollars. But to clarify, this is the town staff staying on top of a grant program that is bringing back to our community those tax dollars for this purpose, so that it is not necessary for the town of Normal to budget for this item for a much needed trail, because I have seen the bike to school programs with a cavalcade of children and their parents banding together to protect themselves on the public streets. And it's nice to know that after this is completed, that won't be necessary. Thank you.
And Mr. McCarthy.
Just wanted to clarify, thank you for the clarification. I meant new current expenditures from the town residents. Thanks for the clarification though, Ms. Smith, I appreciate it.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. With these funds, are these funds required to be used on new construction, or can they be used on repairing of the trails?
Mr. Nord, we do have Mr. Otto on the call, but in this particular question, I'll field that one. We applied for the grant for this particular project, so it has to be dedicated toward this project, which is new construction.
But does it have to be in this particular area, new construction, or is it trail anywhere?
No, it's trail for this particular project in the Eagles Landing subdivision.
Okay, because I was looking at the area, and an aerial map, it shows that there's sidewalks connecting to the school. They even have sidewalks going through the back of the school so folks can get there. And well, I wish we could have used the money for repair, because there's a lot of trail that needs repair. But if we can't, and we're stuck to just this one location, then I guess that doesn't leave us much choice.
Mr. Nord, I will ask Mr. Otto to jump in. There's right of way that was part of the subdivision in anticipation for this future trail. So
But before Mr. Otto speaks, I just want to clarify, we were not stuck with this. We applied for a very specific grant for a very specific project. The grant was awarded for the project. There was no sticking going on here. Mr. Otto.
Thank you, Mayor Coos. The project in particular has been in the works for, my understanding, is about 20 years. When the development started, there was right-of-way and easements that were reserved for this trail project. There continues to be a significant gap, especially along Rab Road and along Shepherd, that this project will fill. In particular, residents coming from the west along Rab run into a dead-end sidewalk just east of Healing Stone Court. So this will be a nice improvement for folks to move over to the corner of Airport and Rab Road, go across the Rab Road intersection there, and then continue on down to Normal Community. So we think it's a nice improvement, and we're excited to put it into implementation, something that was begun. The plans are dated 2015, so they've been waiting for funding for some time.
Thank you. Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, yeah, this is especially important for areas that are maybe in the more far-reaching areas of our community. Mr. Nord, you are a beneficiary of this because I live near where you do. And we have trail extensions that go to schools, nearby schools, and take you through safe streets on neighborhoods. And that's important. And people use it all the time, especially those of us who live out here in kind of some of the more further reaches of the community. And we don't have, other maybe bike friendly roads, all already in our reach. So, to say that this should be used for something else, yeah, it's good the fact that you've got it, but what about the people that don't? That's what made me think about it. These people in those neighborhoods will have something just as nice as you have in yours. And secondly, have you never written a grant before? Please do not keep harping on the fact that I wish this were spent with something else. That's not the way grants work. Thank you.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. It seems like there was confusion about what my intentions were. It's more about the priority of how we're spending the money. We only have a finite amount of money that we get from all sources. And it's just if we have flexibility and priorities. Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The resolution is approved. Item E is a resolution selecting Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley, authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for water system analysis and project design in an amount not to exceed $250,000. Ms. Lorenz? You're on mute.
Yes, I'd like to move that item, please.
Second.
Ms. Lorenz?
Okay, thank you. Again, I want to be on a positive note here because this is a positive story. And I want to lead off our discussion that way, which is, part of my reasoning for pulling this. This is an opportunity, speaking of economic development, which is where really economic development lies, and that is to get ready for future growth. And the area that this is going to support, or the design of this project that ultimately, when completed, will support huge opportunity for growth in that area, thanks to our newest corporate citizen of Rivian. And so not only will it get us ready for what we call shovel ready for grants, like we've just been talking about, it will make Econ Dev's job even that much easier when they've got a prospective company looking at coming here or maybe in 2 or 3 other states. You can go, yep, we're ready. We've got an up-to-date infrastructure, better design than it is right now. We don't have to make excuses or even wait for, let's hope council passes, a improvement to this aging infrastructure. We will be ready. We are being proactive with this, and I applaud the staff for acting proactive and helping out Econ Dev, because I think this will pay dividends for the amount of money that's needed for this particular investment in the design of the project. I think it'll pay off dividends in the future in terms of attracting businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCarthy?
Yeah, thank you. And not to repeat everything my counterpart, Ms. Lorenz, had to say, but similar feelings. I do want to just remind everybody, I did get one question on this, that this is for a design of a system. This is not to build the system. That's the action we're taking tonight, is about authorizing Ms. Reese to go and get analysis and design. And then, of course, that puts us in the ready seat, as Ms. Lorenz mentioned, for, as we actually just recently learned, when you have a shovel-ready project and the as of late federal and state infrastructure grants that have been made available come available, and you have a project that's already been designed, grant dollars flow to your community. And so I think that's a prudent time. This is the time to do it, not wait till opportunities come to our door and then try to play catch up, because that's how we lose in economic development. And so I very much agree that this is an economic development opportunity, particularly in light, a little expansion of Ms. Lorenz's point is that, overtly when we heard from RG Scaringe and their team, they said their vision was to attract suppliers and OEM manufacturers to our community in and around the plant. That was their vision. And so if they're successful in that, which so far they seem to be making great progress, but if they're successful in attracting partners to that area, we need to be planning now, because they're talking about production relatively soon. And so I'm excited. I'm supportive of this. I hope we move it quickly. I hope I can ask all of my counterparts here to unanimously support this. I think it shows good support for the future of normal, of new businesses coming to our community and new job opportunities for our residents. It shows our residents that we are focused on them and the economic health of our community, and that we're focused on bringing and being ready for new opportunities when they arrive. Thanks.
Did somebody say shovel ready? I guess I won't bring that up again. Mr. Nord.
Thank you. I'm pretty familiar with that area. We've got businesses on both sides of College Avenue and, Rivian, of course, there. What area is this, or what parcels that don't have water access is this going to serve?
Well, our plan, and I'm going to ask Mr. Burkhart, who's on the line, to unmute himself and get ready to jump in. But the design concept is to take the water main, which currently is a dead end along Electric Avenue, take it south along the east side of Rivian Motorway, and then down along the north side of College Avenue and loop it back to the existing town main. So we can have an entire loop system, which provides assurance of service and improves water quality. So in terms of specific parcels, it would certainly be growth to the west if that occurs in the future, and growth along College Avenue. Mr. Burkout, can you supplement?
No, that's an accurate statement. Having additional water main in that area will allow us to serve any new business opportunity that would come along to any of those existing parcels out that way.
The parcels that would be new, the existing ones already have it, but the new stuff that's not annexed into the city would be on the west side of Rivian Motorway, is that right? And that's not even annexed.
That is true. There could be development to the west of Rivian.
Okay, but everything then on the east side of Rivian Motorway and all along College already has water main access. Is that accurate?
They do have water service. I can't tell you about all the parcels along College Avenue. I don't know the answer to that question.
Sure. Just by looking at the map that staff provided, it looks like it's going along College Avenue. So I would assume the businesses on both sides got it that way. Then has there been any business that has requested this or has complained about water quality?
No, Mr. Nord. In a communication earlier, I tried to explain that the water quality issue was not customer driven. It was driven by our internal tracking of the water system. Mr. Burkhart can certainly explain a little bit further because it gets into a little bit about chlorine matters and things like that. So I'll let the expert talk about that.
Yeah, so the Illinois EPA requires us to maintain a certain chlorine residual throughout our distribution system at all times. Part of our sampling that we do, not only here at the plant, we collect samples from, I believe, 52 sites throughout our distribution system each month. Is anytime those chlorine residuals are lower in an area, requires us to spend some man hours out and flushing those areas. Essentially, those problems are in long dead ends where water isn't continually running in a loop. It just kind of gets past that last connection point and then just sits there idle. We can spend multiple days out in some of those larger dead end areas each month flushing the system to get the chlorine, to keep the chlorine residuals at a level that the EPA mandates. If those chlorine residuals ever got below that, EPA could fine us and require additional measures for us to take to keep those residuals up.
Okay, this area has been developed for, gosh, probably the last 30 or so years with the water service that it's currently got. How has this not been a problem earlier?
It's always been a problem.
And how's
It's
the town been
continually
resolving it?
addressed each year with continued flushing out there. It's just now that there's potential for further economic growth and development in that area, makes it easier to justify the town, the water fund, investing in this loop out there to address these issues. And EPA mandates are becoming more and more. They've upped that minimum chlorine residual. They've actually doubled it here in the last couple of years from what the residual level used to be to what it is now. They are talking about doubling that again. So it's just going to be continued loss of water that we cannot sell if we have to continue flushing this.
When it flushes, do you know how many gallons are flushed out every flush, or is this once a year flush that you have to do?
Sometimes it can be 2 or 3 times a month.
Okay, because I know some properties that are on dead ends and they don't get flushed that often, not even in Bloomington. And being out there, I just haven't seen it happen that often. But we're talking engineering fees alone of $250,000. We're not even talking construction costs yet. So my question is, with funds so tight, are we better off waiting and saving that money? Because a flush at, what is it, $6 a 1,000 gallons? And that's what consumers pay. That's not what it costs the town to make. Are we better off delaying until we have a customer that's actually going to use that service? Because we don't know how long it's going to be until somebody comes out there to actually use it. That's where I don't understand.
I would offer on that, Mr. Nord, that again, this is as much an economic development as it is a water quality issue. And when we're ready for a customer, that customer is more likely to come. In a scenario where a customer might come and say, I would like to be there, and we tell them, well, we'd love to have you, but it might be a year, 18 months before we can accommodate you at the site. That's poor economic development planning.
Yeah, I disagree. This just kind of looks like
Fair
we're
enough.
running a service to go around Rivian. And if Rivian taps into this, will they be paying tap-on fees to help the town or to help the taxpayers recoup the costs?
I don't believe that's how it works with our water main project unless there's a development agreement. But just to be clear, there is an existing water main up at Rivian's property, so they could have a service line from the existing main.
Okay, then I'm still not understanding the reason for putting this in when there's so many other higher priority infrastructure needs within the community. And this is new spending.
this is a request for council to approve a study and a design for a water main extension. It is not construction. So you're right, the construction cost would be more. We would budget accordingly once we know what the numbers are, or ideally, it would set us up for a grant opportunity. We've been pretty successful with grants. We received a grant just a few weeks ago, a grant award for the Oak Street Water Main project. And one of the reasons that we were successful was because we had a shovel-ready project that was ready to bid. And so it does matter in terms of economic development. If council chose to consider delaying this, it would just be balancing with lost opportunity. We don't know how to define a lost opportunity. So at this point, we know there's a need. We are pretty confident there will be future development based on how things are going with the Rivian investment at their own plant. We're pretty confident that there will be additional fallout development and or subsequent development from suppliers and such. I think that the time is now to set to get ready for providing services when needed. And on top of that, we have an opportunity to address a quality problem. We foresee some additional EPA regulations on the horizon. So we think we're killing a few birds with one stone.
Thank you.
And
Let's move on.
I've got one last question.
Mr. Nord, you exceeded your 10 minutes already. If you want to come back after other people have spoken, we'll allow that. And I have Karen Smith. Ms. Smith?
Yes. So one of the arguments for this is to allow for a shovel-ready project to be in position if grant funding becomes available. How long might this study take to complete? Just this study?
Mr. Burkhart?
We believe the study could be completed probably within a couple months from time it got started, 2 to 3 months. And then it would most likely be like another 4 to 5 months to get construction plans completed. So to complete the plan, the study, and then to complete design of everything to meet those plan goals, a project could be shovel ready and ready to bid April or May of 21.
And the study and the completion of the plans, are both of those components included in this proposal or just the study?
Both components are.
Okay, so approving this expenditure would in fact put us in a position where we would have a design and plans that could then be used in grant applications no earlier than about April of 2021. And if the forecasts are that we are in for a V-shaped recovery about the time that we are coming out of this pandemic, for those who are making an optimistic forecast for this economic situation, we would have the plans in place to attract new businesses to the west side of town and capitalize on that with this program. Is that correct?
That's a fair statement, yes.
Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Thanks.
Mr. Nord?
Thank you. Is this a water only grant that we're applying for?
We haven't yet applied for a grant. We're pretty confident that there will be some sort of grant opportunities on the horizon. It could be an economic development related grant. The particular grant that we were awarded just a few weeks ago was through the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. So I'm hopeful that that opportunity will continue, but we will proceed accordingly, either through the budgeting process, and like always, we will explore as many grant opportunities as possible.
Okay. how was it determined that this was the highest priority to look for a grant than something that affects current businesses and current residents?
Well, we've done a pretty good job this year with water main replacement projects. We're talking specifically about the water fund. And so in terms of the water fund, the last couple of years, we have done a lot of water main replacement projects in residential neighborhoods. My mind just went blank. We identified this as a priority last year. So it does in fact fall within council's strategic plan as a major project that we were giving attention to this year. So we are still in line with the projects that we laid out, the priorities that we defined. And so this, in terms of this being a priority project for fiscal year 2021, this was planned.
Right. Well, the pandemic wasn't that really threw a wrench into things. So I'm not in favor of spending this money here now. I would recommend we wait until we do have a viable business coming in, because if it's going on new ground, waiting 6 months for water service is not that long, because they've got an entire build out where they're going to be doing moving ground. They've got lots of planning and things, and I don't see the rush in doing this. And if you need to spend money out of the water fund or want to, we do have lead line pipes still in the system. I would like to see that accelerated, but thank you.
Are we talking about lead line services? Because our water mains are not lead, Mr. Burkhart.
Correct. Our water mains are not lead. It would just be individual service lines. And we are addressing that EPA requirement kind of as we speak, doing final assessment of counting of all the lines. What part of that is doing an inventory of everything. Once we have that completed, we will be set up to replace those lead lines.
And I would like to see that accelerated before this.
Mr. Nord, order. As a testament to that, city water department, town water department was in my neighborhood checking for lead lines in properties along the street. And just for the record, it's been very clear that a majority of this council has stated firmly that they see this as an economic development opportunity and an opportunity to improve our water system. Mr. Nord, we certainly appreciate your negative opinion on this, but the majority of the council has been very clear where they stand on this issue. Ms. Lorenz.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I kicked this off on a positive note. I feel like I want to kind of bring it back around to that. Let's not lose sight of the fact that this is good economic development. This is not pie in the sky. This is real growth opportunity that we see as a result of a emerging business in our community, i.e. Rivian. And I just want to really point out, again, some irony here that Mr. Nord, you're actually against something that would be good for the taxpayers insofar as more people, big businesses, potentially getting on our water system and helping to pay for that water system and lessening the load for the other taxpayers. You're actually against that. You're actually against economic development readiness that could benefit our property tax base. You're actually against that, something that would actually help the taxpayers. I find the irony in that. This is a good project. Let's not bury this lead. Thank you.
Mr. McCarthy.
Yeah, I want to bring this back and refocus it a little bit back to some of my earliest comments, which is, again, what we're being asked to do is not construction, it's study and design. And what that enables us to do, what do we get for that, right, is it enables the town to be in a position to be ready when new development comes to the area. That seems to be on track with what's going on with Rivian. And it also, if we move forward with this, it puts us in a position to have the materials ready to apply for a grant should and when we need to execute on that. So it does a couple of things. Thank you for the timeline, Mr. Burke, by the way. I appreciate that. It shows you that delay we cannot afford. If we can't even begin to be in a position by early 2021, the time to act is now. If we delay and it takes another length of time, like Mr. Burkhardt just, we're telling business 2 years away before we can actually execute for them. That is unacceptable in creating economic development opportunities. And also, again, to Ms. Reese's point, there's some grant programs that exist now. Hopefully they continue. I think it's prudent for us to move forward given the infrastructure development grants that have been put out on the table from the state and the federal government, because we haven't seen those very prevalently in the last several years. So I don't think we can afford to wait on this type of project. I think getting design and getting ready to act is the prudent economic development path. Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
No.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution is approved. That concludes our omnibus agenda. We have 2 items of new business. The first is a presentation by Jamie Wilkie, a partner at Lauterbach and Amann CPA firm, on the town's annual financial statements and audit report. You can bring Ms. Wilkie in. Well,
Right. Thank you, Mayor. Will include Mr. Hune as well, who will introduce Ms. Wilkie.
Certainly, Jamie Wilkie, she's the audit partner. Worked with her for the last 3 years. And she has presented to you before the audit report. She should be on here shortly. Oh, I see her face on the video. This is part of her requirement as an auditor to speak directly to the council about the audit, about the town finance department, and about the overall financial reporting. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Jamie to address the council.
Thank you, Andrew. Good evening. I am going to share my screen this evening, just a brief presentation. I know it's a rather large document, so I just want to be sure you can all see a PowerPoint presentation in front of you.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Getting some head nods. Thank you. So first of all, I'd like to start by really thanking the finance team. Certainly trying to get through a government audit in the middle of a pandemic presented its challenges as it relates to, being able to have access to information, communication back and forth with the staff. But, really, I think we have the best result we could possibly hope for this evening. We had, again, a clean audit process. I certainly want to thank Andrew, Sue, and the entire rest of the department. And really the town as a whole. This certainly became a true team effort in 2020. So thank you, Andrew. If you could pass along our thanks to the team, we would appreciate it. Just briefly then starting out, just want to reiterate that clean audit process. We did issue what we call an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level opinion that we can issue any government agency. Really, as I indicated, that audit is designed to basically do 2 things. Number one, make sure that we can in fact issue that unmodified opinion, which indicates that the financial statements as presented are in fact materially correct. The second component of our audit each year is really an assessment of the internal control environment. So while we're not providing a specific opinion on internal controls, we are, as part of that process, required to assess that overall control environment. Can we rely upon those policies and procedures that are in place to ensure that the financial numbers that are presented to us by town staff, town management are in fact accurate. Certainly, we would have to bring forth any red flags, findings, issues as part of that testing. We're happy to report this evening. We have no internal control findings or issues to bring forth to council. So truly a clean audit process. I also want to note that the town received the Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. That is another independent third-party review of the annual audited financial statements that is performed by the Government Finance Officers Association and is really the highest level form of reporting that you can have for any government entity. So there is about 1.5 inches thick, pretty stringent checklist that we go through with staff on an annual basis to ensure that the financial statements that are presented in fact meet the criteria of that program. So we are happy to report that the town received that award for the March 31st, 2019 audit. And we will again be working with staff to submit this year's audited financial statements to the program, obviously anticipating receipt of that award again for this fiscal year. As part of the annual audit process, we are required to issue what we call a management letter. Those are really for any future pronouncements Governmental Accounting Standards Board or GASB may have on the horizon, as well as what I would consider best practice recommendations, strengthening of internal control comments. And so this year we only have one comment included in our management letter, and that does relate to a future GASB standard. That is GASB 87. It will be effective for the town 2 fiscal years from now, so 2022. So this is a little bit of a prepping or an advance of one of those statements coming that potentially will affect how we report current transactions, and that is related to lease accounting. So currently we have operating and capital leases. The new statement will provide new definitions as well as required accounting. Typically there's not going to be a financial impact, if that makes sense, under the new accounting model, but simply the recording and some new transactions, terminology, and certainly with any GASB statement, new note disclosures. So just really making council aware that that is on the horizon. We've already offered training on this topic to our clients. We'll continue with that training and certainly work with staff internally as far as the impact when we get to 2022. I do want to point out just a couple of key items within the large document. I know there are a lot of pages. I think you guys are well over 200 at this point. So I have provided just briefly some page number references to some of the key items within the comprehensive annual financial report. The first of which will be on pages 3 through 8 of the document, which covers what we call the transmittal letter. The transmittal letter will highlight a couple of few key items. The focus here is actually not on the financial results for the year, but talking about things such as financial policies that are in place, the local economy, major initiatives for the year. So really just a handful of pages covering what I call all the non-numbers discussion. So I certainly encourage the council to spend some time on that transmittal letter, again, pages 3 through 8 of the document. The next important piece is the copy of that Certificate of Achievement Award. Just wanted to point out that page number reference so you had a chance to look at that. That is provided on page 9 of the comprehensive annual financial report. The next important item would be the independent auditor's report. We covered really what the goal is of the independent audit, as well as the results, that being an unmodified or clean audit opinion. Again, the highest level opinion that we can issue. And you'll find that covered on pages 10 through 11 of the CAFR document. Immediately after the audit opinion, you'll find a very important section labeled Management's Discussion and Analysis, or Mdna. This is provided on pages 12 through 23 of the document, and quite frankly serves as the executive summary to the report. You'll see a lot of the activity for the year really condensed into discussion within those handful of pages. focusing really on major results for the year, trends that we're seeing in the fiscal year, comparisons to prior year results. There's also discussion of significant capital asset investments during the year, as well as changes to the long-term debt structure. I always encourage our councils and boards. I know it's a very large document. I would encourage you to read this section in detail. It is in fact prepared by staff, and I think they've done an excellent job of capturing really some of that high-level discussion for the fiscal year. The basic financial statements then, the numbers and the related note disclosures are provided on pages 24 through 115. I'm not going to go through those in detail, but certainly we can open up at the end of the presentation for any specific questions. And then really wanted to point out the last section of the document, which is what we call our statistical section, that you'll see indicated on pages 171 through 199 of the CAFR report. And just briefly, I wanted to provide a 4-year trend analysis. I know Andrew had covered in his council memo really some discussion on the general fund results for the year. But obviously with that being the major operating fund for the town, I just wanted to prepare basically a little snapshot of what fund balance looked like as of March 31st. So you'll see that the town ended the year with about a $33 million unassigned fund balance in the general fund. Unassigned is what we really label as available to meet future operations. So that is fund balance that is not restricted, committed, or assigned for specific external requirements or internal needs. As we take a look at total expenditures for the year, a common ratio for any unit of government is what is our reserve. So that indicates about a 56% reserve, or roughly 6.7 months of operations that you all have on hand. That was certainly beneficial ending the fiscal year March 31st and kind of heading into the thick of a pandemic to have those positive results for the year that in theory can help support, the current budget year. So just wanted to point out, the strong performance within the general fund this year. Again, I just want to reiterate a very clean audit process, no findings, no internal control issues, really to thank the staff again for all of their hard work. I will say they are a model to our staff here of a client who is very well prepared when we come in. We jokingly talk about sharing their preparation schedules with other clients in hopes that some other clients would take the preparation as seriously as I know the staff does for the town of Normal. So thank you.
Any comments from Mr. Hune or Ms. Reese?
I'm going to defer to Mr. Hune.
No, none from me. I do want to thank my staff. Sue Wong is responsible for a great deal of this information, works with Jamie Wilkie as a partner and her staff. I don't want it to go unnoticed or unmentioned that, again, we have a year of no audit findings, and I would consider that not typical for organizations. And that's a sense of pride for finance and a sense of pride for the downtown itself, because it means everyone's doing their job, from AP to accounts payable to cash and investments to debt management. Everything is being done well and correctly, and it's across the town, all directors, all staff, and finance. So certainly appreciate the effort, and we have a sense of pride with this document, and we hope to continue to do as well as always have been.
And thank you, Mr. Hune. I will jump in and reiterate that certainly we're very proud of the professionalism and the skills of our finance department staff. It is a strong team, and certainly appreciate that in these unusual pandemic situations that Lauterbach and Amen was able to coordinate everything with the staff and move forward. We take preparation of our financial reports and preparation for the audit incredibly seriously. That's how you as council members and policymakers make decisions, and you have to have confidence in that. And so we are very proud of the finance department. We're proud of our financial position, being able to present this this information to you tonight.
Thank you. It looks like we do have some questions. Ms. Smith?
Hi, and thank you for this summation. Ms. Wilkie, if you would, for those who don't know acronyms that well, could you please spell out what GASB stands for?
Yes, thank you. I believe I did, but just to reiterate, that is the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, which is really the standard setting authority for any governmental entity.
Okay, and that's as opposed to FASB, the
Correct.
Financial Accounting Standards Board, which would operate in the realm of publicly traded companies.
Exactly.
Okay, and and I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you would prefer not to answer this question, I would accept that. But on page 6 of the report, the fiscal policies that guide the town of Normal's financial situation are spelled out. Auditors are typically in a unique situation where you tend to work with the same type of client. Would you be willing to comment on the impact those policies might have on how you see the administration operating and how it compares to other clients you've worked with?
Sure. Certainly. So there are a group of bullet points just as reference at the top of page 6 that outline some of the key financial policies. I think I mentioned that as a topic within that transmittal letter discussion. So certainly I will tell you on a couple of them. I think the first one, the forecasting 5 years, you know, typically I'll see many communities only going out potentially 3 years. So I think the forward looking or forward thought from the council of going beyond just that 3-year window, certainly I think is even better best practice, if that makes sense. You know, having a debt policy, we actually have a lot of communities that don't even have a policy of that nature. So I think, you know, certainly a best practice to have that type of policy formalized and in place. You know, I think that the biggest testament would be also the council process and, you know, maintaining that debt level and going through a bond rating agency where you have, you know, a AAA rating. That does not exist for many communities. And I know I sit on ratings calls with clients, you know, other municipalities. And one of the big focuses there is on financial policies. Do you have them? Are they formalized and are they being followed? So I think the fact that the town has many of those best practice policies certainly positions it in a positive light.
And you indicated in your report that Sarbanes-Oxley's does not apply to this audit in the sense that you had to separately testify to an audit of internal controls, but yet your audit practice is to at least verify that controls are in place. And as Andrew indicated, the fact that this fiscal year there were no audit modifications required speaks well of staff following procedures so that there wasn't a need for the auditor to catch any witting or intentional misstatement, that the staff did follow through on reporting transactions as required, but inconsistent with those fiscal policies. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes.
Okay. And I think, one of the things I just wanted to and one more thing that you talked about the financial position and mentioned the reserves putting us in a position to weather this pandemic in good stead, despite some anticipated drop off in reserves. Somewhere in the report, you equate the equivalent of a ratio that I equate to the current ratio that indicates how well liabilities are covered by assets. What is that for the town of Normal?
So that is a ratio typically in government that compares annual operating expenditures in your general fund to what you have available in that unassigned fund balance category. So back to my presentation, that number is roughly 56% for a 6.7 month reserve on hand.
And what have you been seeing as you've been doing audits of other municipalities?
Typically, we see a ratio somewhere between 25 and upwards of, 2/3 of the year, 67%. So you guys are definitely towards the higher end of that, but I think conversely, I can tell you our municipal clients who are maybe closer to the 25% range as they headed into the pandemic are probably in more of a panic mode, I would say. To be able to weather that storm, given that, at this point, they can't cover, in theory, even 6 months of operations, normal operations. So, there's no steadfast rule. Most of it depends on your revenue streams and kind of predictability of those. But certainly, I think to be hovering around that 50% mark is probably a good thing given the current pandemic climate.
And I just wanted to go on the record that there has been some pushback on the fact that we did end 2019-2020 fiscal year with a general fund surplus and speculation that the budget had too much in it to provide for that. But I think if everybody looks back at some of the things that occurred last year pre-pandemic, there were several situations where we were finding that when we put something out for bid, it came in lower than anticipated. There were some savings. There were some other instances that contributed to that, and that Normal does make an effort to have a budget as accurately as possible, forecast what our expenses will be, and not to overestimate with a doom and gloom forecast. So it's just worked in our favor this year that we had this surplus coming into pandemic, kind of like Joseph having the Pharaoh put aside 7 years worth of grain in anticipation of a plague. And let's hope to God this doesn't last for 7 years. And I'll leave it with that biblical reference. Thank you.
Ms. Lorenz.
Okay. There I am. All right. So, Ms. Smith covered a bit, maybe at a lower altitude level of a question that I want to ask Ms. Wilkie. And that is, at the risk of sounding like I'm perhaps fishing for more compliments, much deserved, I would say, to the staff. There's these 6 or so items on page 6, but could you really kind of sum up what it means for a municipality to hit all these high mark best practices, achieve this certification of excellence? Sum that up for us, if you would. What does that say to you about our town?
I think really it's a testament, as I said, to the importance that staff and management places on, the accuracy of the finances, really, to have, policies in place, to have them be followed, because there are plenty of municipalities I work with that might have a policy in place, but that it's not necessarily always followed in practice, if that makes sense.
Yep.
You have the highest level opinion you can receive. You have the highest government report that you can issue out there in a certificate report. No findings. Staff is always fully prepared when we come in. So, very rarely do we have all of those things working together for our municipal clients, if that makes sense. So I would certainly put the audit process, staff's preparation, really in the top probably 5 to 10% of all of the municipal clients that we work with.
Okay. Well, I want to bottle up this moment, but well deserved to Mr. Hune and really the whole entire staff. So thank you. My sincere thank you. And to Ms. Wilkie and your team as well.
Thank you.
If I may, I just want to add a couple final comments to Jamie's comments. And they're going to be a little, I appreciate you fishing for more compliments. I always appreciate that. And I think the staff is well deserved and the town's well deserved of them. One thing where you mentioned we have a 56% reserve, I want to clarify that number just a little bit going forward. That is taking unassigned fund balance against total expenditures in the general fund. The general fund in the CAFR as presented has the general fund operations, it has the vehicle and equipment reserve operations, it has a debt service project sinking fund in it. So what we typically do to say what our reserve level is truly, that is a reserve level, no doubt about it on the face of the financial statements, but in the strategic planning methodology, we take away the vehicle reserve funding that's separated by council to support vehicle and equipment reserves. It could be used for reserve funding in the general fund, but technically it's set aside. The debt service project reserve fund is a sinking fund that's definitely set aside for just debt service funds. So when you carve those two pieces out of that 56% or that $33 million, it gets down to about $22 million of fund balance in the general fund. So that's our true reserve level on this face of the financial statements for general fund. Then we take that number and we take away all the current liabilities to get down to just a clear net spendable cash as a reserve. And we use that as part of our strategy going forward in the budget process. So that's a long explanation, but I know it's come up in the past where we have all this huge reserve on the face of our financial statements, but some of that is already kind of set aside. It's unassigned in terms of financial statement presentation, but we have, from a management perspective, removed some of those funds and said they're not available for reserves in management practice, and this pot is. So when I talk about 15% fund balance reserve general fund versus 56% for the CAFR, that's kind of a unique reconciliation. And I have one more point, and I can't recall what it was, but that was the main point I wanted to make sure that we were aware of.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Wilkie, for coming and sharing directly with us tonight. Andrew, thank you to you and your staff for killing it during this process always. And I hadn't planned, but I'm going to comment on what you just said. Taking a moment, one of my questions was about the 33 million and the definition of reserve that Ms. Wilkie is talking about versus what you're talking about. And I see Ms. Wilkie shaking her head, acknowledging the differences. Thank you. But the preciseness and the conservativeness of our reserve policy, that although vehicle and reserve could be used in a pinch if we needed it to, it's got a specific identified purpose and based on council guidance and council action. Although push comes to shove, we could use those funds, and push may come to shove here based on what's going on in the pandemic so far, but that you're very, very conservative in how you're segmenting our financial reserve policy as set by this council. So 15% as a uncommitted to anything else separate on its own. We could go get some money from other places if it really got bad, but we're taking this wholly uncommitted by council design or council strategic plan and saying, no. It doesn't go to vehicles. It doesn't go to anything. It's solely for this purpose. And that is another reason why I want to say a large thanks, not only for how great the reporting is, as testified by Ms. Wilkie, but how well the town finances are being managed. And by evidence of where we are so far in a pandemic. I know we're not done. I know we've got a lot of work to do yet on that, but just want to say thank you. And you answered my sole question is what's the reserve definitions differences between the two, and I appreciate that answer. Thanks to you and your staff again.
Mr. Nord.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mr. Hume, for explaining the 56%, because that was one of my questions too, is how to reconcile that. Ms. Wilkie, on page 83 in the CAFR, it talks about the interest rate or the discount rate. Could you explain what that what that is?
Certainly, I am assuming you're referencing the Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund or IMRF pension disclosures on discount rate. I just want to make sure we're talking the same.
Yeah, the 7.25%, then it increased to 8.25. What is the discount rate? Like, how is that calculated and what does it mean?
The discount rate that IMRF uses, which is set by a separate independent IMRF board, is in fact 7.25%. The disclosure you're referencing is a required disclosure under GASB 68 to basically give readers of the financial statements a sensitivity. So if that discount rate were to drop to 6.25, what would your net pension liability look like? And you'll see that goes from about 12.6 million to 26.8 million on that page. If we were to assume that those funds earned an 8.25% return, what would your net pension liability look like? And that goes down to roughly $900,000. So it is intended to show a sensitivity range on that discount rate assumption. The discount rate assumption is used to, the idea is hopefully IMRF is hitting that target of 7.25 each year as part of their overall investment portfolio.
So that's the anticipated earnings on the money that we have paid into the pension.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. I'll just add that term discount rate is synonymous with their investment assumption rate. So they're assuming they're going to earn 7.25% over their long run of the investments for that pool. However, so if it's less, then what they're going to earn, your liability goes up. So your basic discount rate and investment assumption are the same. That's what that means.
Okay, then would it be fair to assume that the money that we owe the pension, our pension debt, that is also the cost for us not paying into the pension and for being behind because we're not earning that interest?
I don't think I'd characterize, I don't want to, Jenny.
No, go ahead, Andrew.
I wouldn't characterize it as interest. It's kind of a unique liability in a sense. It's, in terms of to have an interest component, there has to be some kind of transaction exchange between party A borrows money from party B, and party B is going to pay party A back that principal with interest over the terms agreed upon. And that's usually set in stone with the agreement. The liability associated with our pension funds can change up and down depending on certain assumptions that are being used. They in essence are theoretical numbers every single year. And it's money that we need to set aside. So we're actually paying ourselves. The plan liability is actually determined at an amount. And what we have as assets are one thing compared to plan liability. The difference of that number is the net liability we owe. Now it is characterized as money that we owe, but it's in essence, it's money we need to put aside in our own balance sheet to support a long-term liability. So we're not really paying another party. We're essentially paying ourselves. We're putting money aside in our balance sheet to meet that liability. So to characterize it with some kind of interest component, maybe you could get there somehow, but I think I'd be hesitant to make that statement beyond the fact that it's money, again, not like a debt transaction. It's simply money we owe as a liability that we need to set aside in our balance sheet.
Sure. Instead of characterizing it as interest, is it more like the lost investment potential?
That's probably a little more accurate. I would say that if we could pay that, if we could build up our plan assets faster to meet that liability, then we could divert those funds to other areas. So right now we're committing money to fund this liability that once we have it 100% funded, we can move that money to other allocations. But to try to tie that to an interest calculation, I think is a stretch.
Sure.
And Jamie, you may have some comments to share.
No, I agree exactly with your comments there. a little convoluted when you see interest used as the terminology, because again, it's not going to an outside party. It's basically being paid back to yourself, if that makes sense.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. Very helpful. It moves us to the next item, which is the resolution to accept the audited town of Normal financial statements and report on internal controls from the town auditors, Lauterbach and Amen CPA firm for the year ended March 31st, 2020. Ms. Wilkie, again, thank you for your time here tonight. It was very, very helpful and a good description.
Thank you.
We have a motion for approval. Do we have a second?
Second.
Do we have conversation on this one? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, the resolution to accept is approved. We move on to new business. And the first and only order of new business is a presentation of the fiscal year 2019-2020 financial trend and condition report. It's all yours, Mr. Yoon.
Before Andrew starts, I'm going to jump in and introduce this. Mr. Yoon and his finance team puts a lot of effort into this presentation. We use this, we're very proud of this report. Sometimes it's good news, sometimes it's not quite so good news in terms of some of the trends we are tracking. But I think it's very important for council to have this information. We like to use this as we get into the next budget cycle and preparation of our next fiscal year budget. It helps us be confident in some of our projections, and it also helps us make decisions and make recommendations to you. So this report that Mr. Yoon is about to present is very detailed, and I'm hoping council utilizes this throughout the year. There are many occasions where I grab my financial trends report during the year and look something up. So I think it's a useful tool in many respects. So with that, Mr. Yoon, we're going to ask you to make your presentation and share your screen, and we'll go through all your report here.
Yes, thank you, Pam. I'm assuming everyone can see that now.
Yes.
And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, Pam mentioned that very well up front. When she was speaking, she said sometimes the news is good, sometimes the news is bad, and sometimes we're not sure what the news is telling us in this document. But it really is meant to be a discussion point. We don't necessarily have all the answers for where the trends are going, but it certainly is a way to say, here's what we think, and the dialogue gets open from there. This can be very similar to previous years. We have 34 indicators we look at as part of this report. We rate them positive or negative or unclassified. Over the years, we've kind of built in some more slightly gray positive, slightly gray negatives, but we'll show you as we go through it. We cover 6 different categories. You can see there on the slide what they are. This year to last year, pretty much the same, although it's kind of a unique year because things changed drastically after March year end because of COVID and the shutdown, and I'll discuss that in some of the slides, and then made it kind of interesting in terms of displaying this information. But for the most part, nothing changed a lot from last year. Although we did take one of the ratings that was positive and decided, you know what, this doesn't really tell us much positive, and it's more information only. So we flipped that from not a negative or positive, we just made it unclassified. That's the only change in terms of the changes in number or the changes in positive, negative, unclassified. I'm not going to go through all 34, but they all are in your report, and I'm happy to discuss any ones after this presentation you might want to talk about. I try to pull ones that are kind of relevant, at least in my thought, but really all the information is relevant. But I don't want to waste the council's time going through the entire report when you have it at your fingertips. So the first one is assessed value for the town of Normal. For 2019, we saw just a slight uptick, less than 1%. And you can see by the history there, it's been about 1.5 to less than 1% for the last couple of years. This is really a function of new property coming on the rolls. And talking to the assessor for the 2020 levy or the 2020 assessment, it's going to be under 1% also. We're not going to expect too much this year because there's not much new development. Now, we do have Rivian that is going really gangbusters out there, and it's hard to say how much is going to be reported in this next assessment level, but we will start to see some significant growth from them, given all the activity going on out there. It's just hard to know the timing of that in terms of when it's going to hit the rolls. Part of the problem also there is it's in Dry Grove Township, and they're working with them versus Normal Township. So they're doing their best to work with Rivian to find out what the property is and how much it's growing and what's going on. But as you can imagine, it's accelerating significantly, and we will likely see something. I'm just not sure if we're going to see it next year or not. We might see partial. So that's still kind of more to come on that. In terms of next is airport usage, a big increase this last year in 2019, which was really great to see. This was a really difficult trend to look at for many, many years, as you can see on the chart. Hit a low point in 2017, had some recovery in 2018, and another big recovery in 2019. Unfortunately, this is one of those things where COVID hit, and we're going to see a difficult 2020. I haven't got numbers from them yet, but we are going to communicate with them and see what's happening. But we do know, as everyone knows, that air travel has been significantly reduced during these COVID months, and it will likely translate to a lower than expected one for 2020. That's what we put it positive with caution. We see a positive trend here, but we're not sure what's going to happen with the recovery of the travel industry from COVID. So it's positive with caution. Next one is Amtrak usage. We're also seeing a downturn there. This is going to be a calendar year 2019, so it's not really COVID related. We will likely see a dramatic decrease in 2020, similar to airport usage. We are talking now to Amtrak about kind of what's going on with that in terms of 2 years now of decreases in ridership. It's kind of uncertain what's causing it. In the past, we knew it was kind of high-speed rail changes and so forth, but now that's for the most part in place. So we're still kind of studying that area, but we are marking it as a negative trend for now. Unemployment rate, this is certainly one that had a great story and will continue to have a great story. For now, we're at 2.3% as of March. Now we take a snapshot of the unemployment every year as of March, our fiscal year end. And you can see by the chart there that everyone had a significant improvement from March 2019 to March 2020. And 2.3%, 2.4, 2.9, 3.4, those are really low numbers, which is wonderful to see in the economy. But as you know, this is a March number. And then what happened in April or near the end of March and April and May were some big changes. So we looked out, we looked at just the month end for this report. But you can see we obviously spiked up a lot with all the reductions in staff and hotels and entertainment and restaurants and bars and so forth. You can see that it spiked up a lot in April, which you've probably seen from other presentations. It's come down in May a little bit. It took a pretty nice dive in July. So things are on the way to recovery. I've talked about this before with the COVID presentations. The market is assuming we're going to see some kind of a structural unemployment for a while until companies kind of get comfortable with what's happening and the uncertainty with the vaccine and the COVID and so forth. But we will see it continue to drop, assuming things continue on the course they are now. But it's still a problematic area and had a dramatic increase, change from our year end March to now, but it is going in the right direction. County workforce, again, this is kind of another challenging area that we're looking at a lot with EDC and regional planning to find out kind of what's going on there. We continue to see a smaller drop or slight drop-offs every single year. This will also be impacted by the COVID numbers and the shutdown. To the extent it will be, I don't know. We haven't got those numbers for 2020 yet, but we are seeing some issues there, and we do break that as negative. Moving on to revenues, this just essentially shows you a pie chart of of all the revenues we have that are town-wide. Obviously, the biggest one is local sales tax, and then property tax, state sales tax, charges for services, water, and so forth. So it kind of gives you a flavor for the most part, a fairly diversified portfolio of revenue, although we do have heavy reliance on sales tax, which is not untypical for most municipalities. State income tax this year, real significant increase and honestly kind of unexpected. You know, we came off a pretty strong year in 2019 and then 2020 also another big year. So that's what's drove a lot of our surplus for the fiscal year in 2020 was this revenue source itself. It came in very strong, along with expense savings, of course. It's hard to say. We are tracking revenue now, you know, even more close than we typically do because of COVID, and we track it pretty closely before then. And we are seeing some challenges in other revenue sources. Income tax, not so much, which is a bit of a surprise. I can speculate why, but we'll get into that more in the budget process. But for the most part, we are seeing impactful revenue issues for sales tax, but not income tax. I probably spend too much time on this particular issue here, but I do want to remind the council that it is significant. You know, the state, and it might be more relevant for this year coming up, because the state has essentially dipped into the municipal's pot of income tax sharing since 17-18 fiscal year with a 10% cut and then a 5% cut for the next 2 years. It's hard to say that. So if you look at this chart here, the blue chart, the blues are the actuals we collected. The red would have been what we would have collected if the state hadn't cut part of our income tax share. And that's about over $1 million of lost revenue to the town because of what the state's taken from all municipalities. And then we got about $300,000 that we're planning on losing this year. So this is getting, you know, pretty significant. There's not much we can do about it other than lobby as much as we can legislature and put pressure on them to restore, you know, our original 100% revenue versus 95% of it. Because it is a drain, but it is something that I kind of keep out there just as information for you and for your colleagues. In terms of property tax, you know, you know the story there. We'll be discussing property tax in the next couple of months. This pie chart gives you a sense of what the last property tax year, what the rate distribution is. Obviously, Unit 5 remains the lion's share of the property tax that you pay. Town normal is around 11.5%, library is about 5%, and you can see other ones as you go. We're feeling upward pressure on the property tax because of the pension costs, and that's basically what's causing a lot of our upward pressure. We'll be talking a lot about that in the coming months and as part of the budget process, but that's where we're seeing some of this 11.5% increase. We're still kind of in where we like to be in terms of historically, right on that 11-12%. But again, we are feeling some pressure there, and you're well aware of that, and we'll be talking more about that later. In terms of property tax, kind of continuing on there, this is just a snapshot of the rates for this last fiscal year. You can see the town normal is the lowest among all of our peers there. Bloomington, obviously, very close to us, Springfield, Champaign, Peoria. The blue bar is just a function of their park rate. Bloomington and Normal support their own parks within their own resources, and those districts have a property tax rate on, you know, for their park district and for their operations. That just kind of makes it more even. But generally speaking, obviously we're the lowest here, and we've been that way for many years. In terms of the community-wide property tax rate, this is what you pay for all the taxing jurisdictions within town normal and within those towns. You can see we're kind of in the top 4 there, or the top 3 in terms of our rate. Again, trying to be as thoughtful as we can in terms of property taxes. Obviously, it's a big topic and one that people stay on top of.
Just for clarification, Mr. Hune, when you say we're in the top 3, what you mean is the lowest,
correct,
the lowest few of
right,
the property tax rate. So just
correct.
clarifying.
It's more like golf scores. We're than basketball. Correct. Thank you. Utility tax. This continues to be a problematic revenue. It basically has been decreasing since 2014. We had a little bit of a reprieve in 2019 with 1.1% increase. And then this year we got socked again at 6.5. A lot of this is a function of how the weather is that year in terms of winter and summer. And then of course, cell phones and cable are part of this utility tax. And those are continuing to be a lot of downward pressure because of other cell phones. And I've discussed this at length with the council before, and what's taxed and what's not taxed versus a landline. And data, and then also cable being more available in terms of other ways to stream data versus just cable television. So these are problematic revenues. They're not small. You know, we're looking at almost $4 million a year from this, and not quite $4 million anymore, 3.86 million. So it is problematic, and when we can watch as much as possible, but in some ways our hands are kind of tied on where that's going to go. Sales tax, again, the light blue is the local sales tax. The dark blue is the state sales tax. Just as a reminder, the state shares 1% of their sales tax with us, and their local sales tax is 2.5. So you can see, obviously, it's significant compared to the 1%. You know, it's going okay. We ended the year down for local and not as strong as we thought for last year for state. A couple things to note there. Last year we had kind of an artificial number, not artificial, but it was artificially enhanced in terms of the actual economic reality of what's going on by one taxpayer kind of getting caught up with some sales tax they did not pay. They were caught through an audit, and that kind of boosted that year up significantly for many, many years of not paying. And so that kind of made the next year a little more offset. If that hadn't happened, and also our May numbers were low because of COVID and the shutdown occurring in the middle of the middle of March, that kind of contributed to a 1.2% drop from the previous year. And so both those would have been a little better under the circumstances of the shutdown not occurring, which it did. We can't obviously stop that from happening. It happened. And then of course, the kind of the increase in the 2019 that kind of was larger than typical to compare against. Food and beverage tax, kind of the same situation here, although it has over the last few years started to kind of steady in terms of, I guess you could call it kind of a matured revenue now. And what that means is a lot different to different people. To me, it sounds like, you know, we're pretty stabilized in terms of restaurant offerings. So right now we had a small drop to 2.1% down from last year. Again, I look back at the numbers, we track it every single month, and we were tracking slightly above last year's numbers every single month, except for March, where we obviously had the shutdown in restaurants and bars. And just that month where we had a significant drop in revenue for the year took us down below last year. But it was pretty tight the whole year. So I think that revenue source is probably going to remain it'll probably increase annually, but not as much as we've seen in the past. And that's why I have kind of rated positive with caution. Total expenditures, again, this just gives you a sense of what's going on with our expenses. You can see public safety is the largest expense we have for the town. That's of course police and fire. You know, next largest is going to be administrative, and that covers a lot of things in terms of council action and reports or activity, culture and recreation, parks and rec, water and sewer, and so forth. General fund personnel costs. This is the analysis that we look at to kind of compare total general fund expenses as a comparison to personnel cost only. Personnel costs make up the majority of the town's cost because we're a service-oriented operation, as you can imagine. We are seeing an uptick in this one to 2020 from 64.5 to 68.6. The lion's share of that is, again, this upward pressure we have on funding pensions. The pension contribution that we make every year is categorized as a personnel cost because it is essentially a benefit cost for the police and fire. So we categorize as a personnel cost, and that is accelerating, as you can imagine, through our property tax issue. And that's a long story about 24-day deadlines and so forth, but that's causing the majority of that increase. So we mark it as positive with caution because we feel that that's kind of out of our control. It was a pretty positive direction. We have 1 year of a negative direction, so we're not quite ready to switch over yet, but we're watching that one. And this is kind of where you get to the push-pull of, well, is it positive, is it negative, when do we switch to negative from positive, and so forth. But again, the information here is just displayed for a dialogue and for information purposes. Overlapping debt, this is the debt of all the property tax or all the local governments that make up the town of Normal's area. You can see that's been dropping off since 2016. We're seeing that drop down as a percent of assessed value. So we kind of compare the overall debt of all the taxing districts to the overall assessed value, and we can see that that's getting in a good direction. Nice to see that continues to be positive. And also, this is just the town's debt position here. You can see we've been dropping down since 2016. Again, we're paying down principal. We haven't issued new debt in a couple of years. We've done some refunding, of course, that will manage that better. So we are seeing a positive payoff here of that debt. Now that could obviously all change if we issue new debt for new services or new fire stations or any kind of capital need. But for now, we're sort of in a debt payoff run on our obligation. General fund balance, we had a very good year, up 9.31%. We went from 20.5 million to 22.42 million. We had about a $1.9 million surplus in general fund. A lot of that was driven by the state income tax coming in much higher, as well as some expenditure savings that have been talked about specifically. And then globally, we always have some surplus in terms of personnel. We always budget at 100%. Full-time position all being funded, and we have turnover and so forth. And then recruitment processes. So we usually have a positive there, but most of this was driven by some strong revenue from year end that we didn't expect. Police pension plan and fire pension plan. Most of these slides are not good, and they haven't been for a while. They dropped down quite a bit this year. You can look at police pension here. We went from 55.8% funding to 50.78% funding. So we're going the wrong direction. And this is not because we're not trying to reverse this trend. A couple of things have happened in 2020 to make that number drop five points. And there's kind of a combination of a couple of things. The main issue is with this actuarial analysis that gave us that 50.78% for 2020. We've updated the mortality tables in the pension fund actuarial analysis. And essentially what it told us was people are living longer. And when people live longer, the benefits paid more, there's more liability associated with that person. So we had to essentially phase that assumption into our programming for the pension funding. We did phase in over 0.5%. So we phased in kind of half of the mortality table in this year. We'll do the rest of it next year to kind of make the a little more smooth. But that's part of the problem there is if you increase the longevity of someone's life that's in a pension plan, you increase the liability because you're paying more. So our funding dropped a bit. Also last year we did switch from 100% funding to 90% funding. That did have a downward pressure on that funding level. And then we also continue to get 1 year closer to 2040, which requires 100% funding. And we're still struggling with investment earnings. In fact, this year, the worst time to look at investment earnings was March 31st of 2020, because that's when the market was just in a tailspin because of what was going on with the globe in terms of the pandemic. So some of this might bump back because we already have seen some of that bump back in the market significantly, but that was a tough window to hit. So that a lot of that is there too. We're going to discuss more of this coming up in the next few months on property tax levies and pension funding. It's going to be definitely some thoughtful conversation going on there as part of that process. So more to come on both those. Again, fire, the same situation, went from 61 to 55. They had the same problem. We implemented a mortality table update that was required, that was not required, but was needed to kind of align the best assumption we can for our programming. And we're trying to manage that best we can. IMRF continues to do pretty well. There was discussion earlier about their discount rate. They did change their rate from 7.5 to 7.25 last year, 2018. And And you said that had a big impact on our funding position. They did rebound a lot in 2019. IMRF is a little different than the pension plans. Their hands aren't quite as tied in terms of what they can invest in. They typically have a better return because they can reach out to different markets that the pension funds can't. But that might change with consolidation and so forth. But for now, they typically have done better than the pension funds because they're a bigger fund for one thing. They can utilize leveraging there for investments, and they can invest in things that right now are restricted to the pension funds.
Mr. Hune, if I could jump in before you get
Yes.
off the pension fund topic, just a reminder, as you had shared, the IMRF graph here is based on a calendar year basis. For Illinois Municipal Retirement Fund, the town's contribution to that is based off what we're told to pay. We don't have to have any actual assessments that we control, that we react to. This is a statewide fund, and we are a member of that. Conversely, the police and fire pension funds that on the two previous slides, just to reiterate, the snapshot of the fund balance or the percentage funding, the 50+%, that is based on that March 31st snapshot. That's the last day of our fiscal year. So that's the window we're looking at. And as Mr. Hune indicated, that's one of the worst days of the market and the value of our pension fund at that point. But in 2019, the state did authorize a consolidated public safety pension program that will address downstate police pension fund and downstate fire pension fund, of which we will become a participant in that. At this point, we still operate our own pension funds because the consolidated statewide program will not be active for approximately 2 years yet. So there will be some changes on the horizon, but for now, we'll continue focusing on our two individual public safety pension programs.
Thank you. Switching over to water fund now. This fund is, I would say, is in a good position. The revenue was a little down from the previous year, and that's typically a function of weather sometimes. Cash investments were up a bit, which is good, but mostly a function of expense savings. But for the most part, this fund is end of the year in a good position. Sewer, pretty much the same story. It hasn't always been that way, but this is on a positive path now in terms of funding for revenue, rate structure, and for capital improvements. You can see we are getting to a more respectable cash and investment line revenue, and that's important for what's ahead in terms of capital spending, which the council is well aware of. And the fund can now take on those projects in a systematic way. It has the money to support that service. Health Dental Fund, this has been kind of a roller coaster for the last couple of years, mostly downward in the last few years from 2016 to 2017, 2018, 2019. A lot of that, those decreases were a function of some growing prescription drug, kind of boutique drug services for significantly ill folks, and the drugs are extremely expensive. That's kind of been mitigated a little bit in 2020. We did see a bump up. So we've kind of, that's in a nice direction. We still have marked as negative because just 1 year of reversal doesn't necessarily change our minds, but we are seeing a positive there. Plus, I will mention that a lot of this, the last quarter of the fiscal year, the last February, March, we weren't seeing a lot of claim activity because of COVID. So we had low claim expense. But even prior to that, we were still seeing pretty good claim activity in terms of favorable for the fund balance. So we continue to watch this fund very closely. It looks like it's on a, if I may, a healthier path going forward. But we'll continue to watch it. We still have it as negative because we're not trusting it quite yet, but we feel good about it, and we'll continue to utilize as much as we can to figure out how this fund is going to move forward. Lastly, the financial strategies, and this is actually the point I was going to make when I was talking with Jamie, was talking about the audit and our policies. The policies we have listed in the CAFR, those are kind of high level ones. We have more than just those. And these are kind of the ones we also live and die by. I'm going to go through a couple of all of them real quickly. General fund reserves. We have this as cautious outlook. We would have it as positive outlook because we are meeting our 15% reserve level. In fact, we're a little above that as the end of fiscal year, around 16 or 17 because of the surplus. We're holding that surplus in general fund because we're going into a rough budget year with COVID. So we're not sure how that's going to all fall out exactly. We have numbers and we have speculation and we have projections, but we're doing more and more of that as part of the budget process. So we just marked this as cautious outlook. I don't want to overly alarm the council. We just know that we're going into a tough budget year because of what we're experiencing with COVID and the downturn. It looks like it's starting to kind of get better, but again, we're going to be cautious in terms of the outlook. Kind of reminder for COVID, this is a chart you saw in a presentation some time ago by me. However, that chart just went through June. We now have a July close on the books here too. And you can see that the blue line was the adopted budget for revenue for those months year to date. The red line is our COVID budget and the red line is the actuals. And then the purple line was the COVID budget, kind of the retooled adopted budget. We are starting to bend that line down now, back down to where we thought we'd be for the COVID budget. Still above, year-to-date revenue than we expected for COVID. Obviously, well below budget, adopted budget, but above what we thought in COVID. But we are getting closer there in terms of where that revenue will land. Expense, we're seeing a lot of good savings here, and this is actually helping out significantly. Again, blue line adopted budget spending by month year-to-date. Purple line is the COVID expectation, and then the actual is well below COVID. So we have a real favorable balance there in terms of the COVID expectation to actuals. And this is primarily personnel savings, a lot in Parks and Rec, as we already discussed before, but now we have another month here. So we continue to see savings there. So what does that translate into for fund balance? Again, the same lines. Purple is our COVID budget. This essentially tells us what our cash flow or our fund balance is going to be for the entire fiscal year by month. The blue line is the adopted budget. We thought we'd kind of end at about $35,000 surplus as the adopted budget, kind of a balanced budget with some small surplus. The COVID budget, we expected about a $6.2 million deficit. I don't think that's probably going to be worst case scenario at this point in time. We are starting to bend down now to the adopted budget, and we'll probably eventually get somewhere between those two lines, the purple and the blue in the end. But we're going to be looking at this very closely. And we're doing it right now, but as the budget process commences, which we're well into now, we're going to refine all these estimates and get a better idea where we stand. But I feel pretty confident to say 6.2 deficit is probably going to be the absolute worst case, particularly given the number we're seeing now. And that assumes nothing else occurs going forward as another shutdown or a resurgence, beyond what the hospitals can handle and so forth. So a lot left there, but looking okay for now. Vehicle reserve, again, we put that as cautious also. There's quite a bit of money in the vehicle reserve right now, about $8 million. Now that is spent, that's going to be spent down in the next 5 years on vehicle and equipment. So we're kind of at our 75% liquidity in year 5. But we're kind of put that money aside again in case we need it. So we're using it as a cautious outlook for those funds. Again, I don't want to overwhelm the council that we're broke. We're not nowhere near broke in that fund. In fact, we're overfunded right now, at least in years 1, 2, and 3. But the out years under normal spending will be back down to our reserve level. So we have some wiggle room there to deal with that cash if we need to as part of general fund. And again, this will all kind of fall as part of the budget process. We come back to you the next few months with that information. Contingency funding level, this is where we like to put away a little bit of kind of unallocated budget in the general fund. We shoot for 1% of expenditures. We're not quite there. We did restore some contingency funds in the budget last year, and that was nice to have. We're not at 1% yet, and it's likely we're going to be using that money to support certain things in the out years going forward as a budget process. So it's kind of a negative outlook, just because I know we're going to need that in the out years, and I don't want to necessarily say we're going to have it available in those years, but it's there now, but it's probably going to get swallowed up once we get the budget process going. Again, we'll come back with more information on that when we get to it. Debt management, that's a positive outlook. You know, we're not touching that one. We keep that well funded at all costs, essentially. And it's always been in a good position, and that continues to be a positive outlook for us on that. Health insurance fund, again, we are seeing a tick up, and it's nice. It's probably more negative than cautious, but again, we are seeing a little bit of growth there in the fund balance, and that's nice to see. But as you know, the health system and health expenses are difficult to predict. We have a fairly small employee base, so it's challenging, but certainly the town meets that challenge with plan changes and rate issues and fundamental reserve policies. So we're doing what we can to manage that best we can. So it's kind of a cautious outlook in terms of my thought. Water and sewer water fund, again, positive outlook. Right now we're meeting our target, everything except for year 5 in the water fund. So our funding is in a pretty good position until year 5, and then we're a little bit below our 20%. We are meeting our capital reserve level of 1.5 million there, which is good because those things can change on a dime. We can have a significant need in operating or capital costs come up. We can have a significant overrun in certain things, so you never know. So we'd like to keep a balance there, which we do have a pretty good balance in the capital reserve fund. And that'll all be planned out next 5 years to be spent down as we continue. Sewer fund, same situation. We're above all targets. That's 25% for sewer fund, which is good. And we're above our targets in the capital reserve. Again, as part of the planning process for the budget, you know, we'll continue to look at those numbers and then add projects when we can to essentially get that money spent and utilized in the services in the capital services we need. Upcoming budget, again, I've alluded to it a little bit there. To recap, we ended the year with a strong surplus, about 1.9 in general fund. We're projecting about a $6.2 million deficit for this year. Although again, I mentioned that's kind of worst case scenario, and I feel pretty comfortable saying that. It'll probably be I'm not really sure, but it won't be quite that bad unless something occurs that we're not expecting. And we are going to be dealing with COVID residual issues this year, and probably in the out years to recover, assuming a time frame of vaccine and economic recovery. Everyone has kind of a different opinion, but everyone's saying that it's going to be at least 1 to 3 years before you get back to kind of pre-COVID budget or pre-COVID activity. That changes occasionally, but it's going to be an issue we need to resolve and work in our budget process. That was pretty quick and fast, but if you have any questions or want to cover other areas of the report, I'm happy to do so, or answer any questions about what's been presented today.
Thank you, Mr. Hune. Oh, Mayor, you are muted.
Thank you, Andrew. This is such a valuable report to the council and to the general public in terms of a really clear and concise snapshot of our financial condition, and done in such a way the layman or the non-professional can really understand what our position is. I know I use this all the time when I'm talking to people, and I know my fellow council members do as well. So I was actually expecting worse. And I'm glad to see that it really hasn't changed that much. And you've been very clear to point out things that are cautious and will require us to deal with going forward in the next budget. So again, to you and your staff, a stellar job on presenting information to us in a very digestible manner.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Mr. Nord, do you have a question?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Hune. This is very concise. I appreciate it. Something that I think we skipped over was the construction permits. This really isn't a question, just more of a comment that we're down again on the construction permits. Then on page 40.
I'm sorry, Mr. Nord. I'm going to jump in and ask Mr. Hune if you have an update on where we're at for the current fiscal year on construction permits. You might not, I'm not sure.
I do. We are seeing an uptick in comparison to the same time frame from last year. So, you know, we are a bit down in our calendar year from 18 to 19, but 20, we are starting to see some growth in terms of single family detached permits. If you take the same time period from basically January to August timeframe of 2020 to 2019, we've got 30 compared to 21. So it's nice to see in this 2020 year, through year-to-date August, we're actually up over last year. So that's nice to see. So I would suspect that when you see this report next year, despite COVID and economic downturn because of that and shutdown, we are actually seeing some activity. Also, I would say that a lot of residential remodeling going on compared to previous year, and that's to be expected because, as you know, people were home and they went to Menards and they went to Home Depot and they went to those places and they started fixing walls and windows and bathrooms because they noticed it more, probably. So we're seeing an uptick in residential commercial remodeling. And then you cannot not mention this. The commercial remodeling going on at Rivian is extraordinary. So I think we're going to have a very nice picture next year based on this year because of those factors. And a side note, we're collecting a lot of fee revenue from Rivian on those permits that we would typically not get because it's such a sizable construction process going on out there. So that's kind of a quick on what's going on next year.
Sure, that'll be nice to see this trend reverse next year then. When you were talking about the contingencies, you had mentioned that we will be using some. Why, if it's money we know we're going to use, why list it as a contingency instead of into whatever budget line that it should be in?
Sure.
Well, this particular year, I'll jump in, Mr. Hand. This particular year, we know we're going to use it because we were hit with a pandemic. So the contingency is being used for our general operation.
Sure, but I'm talking about the ones out in the future.
Well, we always set it aside for unplanned expenses. We know that things are going to come up during the year that council might have an interest in, that they might want to support. So we set those funds aside unallocated as a contingency for opportunities. And so this year, the contingency is being eaten up basically because of our COVID unexpected situation. Generally in our budget, we set that money aside knowing that, and history shows that opportunities arise that we believe are worth allocating those funds. And so we have a pot of unrestricted, unallocated dollars that are available for such opportunities.
If there's an opportunity that's over $500,000, are we able to just add that or somehow have the council approve additional spending?
Oh, sure. We could always ask council to authorize that, but the $500,000 is not necessarily, it's generally not one particular large expense. It might be $10,000 here and $250,000 there or something like that. So it's a basically a pot that we have for opportunities that maybe come along during the fiscal year, something we missed, something unexpected, but it gives us that cushion of so we are able to address issues.
Okay, thank you. And then page 30, the total outstanding debt. My understanding is that's the total outstanding debt or money that's owed, but that's just a snapshot in time. It doesn't include, like the total of the payments we will make for that debt. Is that accurate?
That's correct. Yeah, that's the principal outstanding that we owe.
Okay, but that also doesn't show all the money that the town owes for outstanding debt. It doesn't include, well, does it include the fire pension debt?
No, this particular chart just shows our traditional general obligation debt, where we have essentially borrowed money from the market to do certain services. In line share, we built fire stations, we did the uptown renewal.
Sure.
So this is actual debt exchange of debt money and interest.
But as far as money that the town owes, is there a report that's got or a number that's got the accumulation or the total of the town debt or the money that taxpayers owe, like the pension debt,
like
the general
liabilities?
obligation debt?
Sure. Well,
Money
you'd find
that's
you'd find it in the financial statements under liabilities for the town. That would list out the debt obligation. It would list out our liabilities for the pension fund, IMRF, police and fire, OPEB. They're all liabilities to the town, and that's just on our balance sheet.
Okay. And we had talked about this before. Whenever we total all that out, that's about $215 million before this report, this CAFR that came out. So just when we talk debt, that's the number that I'm thinking is how much do taxpayers owe, or how much does the town owe, not separated out by what type of money or what type of obligation it is. But thank you for the report. It was very interesting. I do appreciate it.
Just in terms of that number though, Mr. Nord, I think we've explained in the past, I think your summary includes OPEB, which stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. Mr. Hune, do you want to give us the Reader's Digest version on what that means and why that's reported?
Sure. GASB requires that we report the value of the retirement benefit that the town has as a liability for employees who are eligible for that. So the town provides a certain benefit to retirees. We pay a portion of their health premium. Now all people get this. In fact, we eliminated that policy some time ago, but there are still people who are working here and people that are currently retired that receive that benefit. So we don't pre-fund that benefit. The idea is as you work, you're building that benefit as you work, and then you retire, you receive that benefit from the town. We just do it pay as you go on that. We write a check to pay those expenses. We're not going to pre-fund that liability, but we have to show the liability on the books of the town. I can't recall the amount. I'll tell you how it's like. I want to say 45 million, but
correct.
It's a big
million.
number, right? It's a big number on the books, but I just want council to understand there's a benefit that doesn't exist for anyone hired after 2007. It's also a benefit that's not going to be prepaid and does not need to be prepaid. So just exercising cautious when we say that's debt, because it would imply that we have to pay it, prepay it. And so I just, that's a big number that I think just needs some explanation.
Right, and I wouldn't recommend to the council that we start putting money aside for that liability, because the liability itself will eventually decrease on its own as people that are eligible for that benefit, that aren't eligible, retire.
Sure, but we have to pay it if the benefit is due, correct?
Correct. Yeah, right now we on a pay-as-you-go basis for all retirees who have that benefit, we just pay the benefit as they use it. We're not going to pre-fund it per se.
Yeah,
And
the only
we
other
pay-
alternative is to not have that benefit anymore. So it's either
And-
lose the benefit or report it like it is. So
Sure. And then for the bond debt, we pay that as we go, as the bills come in. Is that correct? We're not saving money for the bond debt either.
Well, we pay the bond debt based on an amortization schedule that we've agreed to with the bondholders. So that's pretty much set in stone unless we refund it, which we've done several times. So I'm not sure if I follow what your question was on that. I'm sorry.
we have the debt service and project reserve fund, so we are setting money
Right.
aside to pay our obligations.
Right.
Just to be clear, yeah.
Yeah, we make sure every year we have at least that amount plus 25% more as our sinking fund.
Sure. Just whenever taxpayers ask how much
Nord,
the town owes, they're looking for just a total dollar amount. And that's
Nord.
my final question. So you can cut me off.
You can come back with that question. You've exceeded your 10 minutes according to Robert's Rules of Order. So, yep, put your hand up again and you can ask that question. And we go to Ms. Smith.
Just a few questions here, Mr. Yoon. Thank you for this report. I love bar graphs. page 28, where you're looking at the general personnel cost as a percent of total general fund expenditures, you mentioned the impact of the pension fund obligation on these numbers, and an explanation explaining the change in treatment for pension fund forecast as contributing to the uptick from 2019 to 2020. Does this also factor in the impact of the change in the minimum wage, even though we don't have as many part-time employees that might have been subject to that?
No, that would, I'm sorry, that would certainly impact it. With the increase in minimum wage, we are seeing more payroll expense in a normal year, of course. A lot of those folks were released for COVID reasons, but yes, that's going to challenge that number more, and it's going to happen every single year going forward until it finalizes at $15 an hour. So that's upward pressure on that line.
And that increase in the minimum wage, did that create a ripple effect that is causing an adjustment to the pay scale of all other employees to maintain a recognition of the value of their experience in relationship to this new scale for entry-level employees or minimum wage employees?
Well, I can give some comment, and I'd probably ask Pam to give some comment too. But when we increased the minimum wage, we only did it from at the floor level. We didn't enhance anyone else's pay because of that.
Okay.
Now there will be some compression issues to deal with going forward, but right now the increase that we have adopted, which have been 2 so far, have only been to move those folks who were at the floor up to the new level. And I would always ask Pam to kind of become to that.
No, you summed it up. Thank you.
And you may not have this information available tonight, but when we are meeting for the budget, page 25 has the town expenditures by type, and it gives percentages. I would find it useful, and again, I don't know that you have it available tonight, but I would find it useful to recreate this analysis, for example, to 2010 to 2019 pre-pandemic, and where we stand post-pandemic, so that we can take a look at how our expenditures might have been changed over time, because I know there's an ongoing effort to cut costs. And I would be interested in seeing if we've stayed consistent, because I know that in planning, there's a difference between line and staff, that if you're in a line position in private sector, your job is usually safer than if somebody who's in a supporting role. So I would be curious to see if over time we have made cuts in some areas where we're as lean as we can get. And that comparison would be helpful. And likewise, the chart that you've got on page 15 about the property tax rate distribution, if for our planning session with the budget, if it would be possible to take a look at how this might have changed dating back to 2010 to the current date, just to see the relative mix of tax rates, because I know Illinois residents get frustrated because there are so many people or entities with their hands in the pie, and see if there's been any shift in who is claiming those taxes. So just a wish list for our upcoming budget session. And that's all I've got.
Sure, we can do that.
Mr. McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. The night of thank you to Andrew Hune and his staff night. One of my favorite times of year, sad to say, but true. I love receiving these reports and spending time with them. And again, to echo a comment the mayor made, being able to understand our finances in graphical, simple, concise ways is really great for the taxpayers. And I think that that's one of the many in a list of great successes in how we communicate, how you communicate numbers to the public, and it's getting better all the time. And so I appreciate all the hard work putting this together and giving not only us but the community a sense of how we're doing financially in a simple to understand way. I'm going to keep my comments kind of high level. We're going into budget. We have plenty of opportunities to roll up our sleeves and down and dive deep. I do have some asks, but I'll save those as the months go on. But I do want to weigh in on one subject about debt and preciseness of how we communicate with the public. First, if people want to understand what our total liability is, as Mr. Hune said, that's accurately represented in the town's total liability list. And it's, again, not confusing. It's listed accurately and transparently always. But the preciseness of the word, the term debt, right, means something very specific in how we present financial information. And debt is defined as an amount owed for funds borrowed. And as the previous conversation illustrated, is pension liability is not borrowed funds. It's actually money we owe to ourselves. And so we have to be careful about not misleading the public by trying to label pension liabilities as debts. Another comment is debt is a specific tool that we use and has specific terms, a specific start and a specific end date. Pension liabilities are operating costs. As long as the town exists and hires people, we will have pension liabilities, and we will have, and they will go up and down based on market performance, what our operating levels are, how much staff we do and don't have. And so try to mix all of our expenses and call that somehow debt, again, is very imprecise and really is a misleading way to present the information. And so I encourage all of us to make sure that we're being precise in how we communicate with that operating expenses are not debt, payroll expenses are not debt. Debt is very specific in money we borrow to do things and that we pay back over time. Again, Mr. Hune, thanks very much for all this great information. I've spent a lot of time already. I'll continue. And tonight is a great launching point for us to start thinking about as a group of our pension and funding and expense and revenue discussions to come in coming months. So thanks for preparing us so far. Appreciate it.
Mr. Nord, I'm going to go back to you. Well, Mr. Preston raised his hand. Now I'll come back to you, Mr. Nord, if you still want to ask that one remaining question. Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to echo some of the comments made by others around this meeting toward Mr. Hune and his staff. It does seem like just a meeting that you guys are able to shine in all of the outstanding work that your team does for this organization and ultimately for the people of Normal. So thank you for that. I would suggest an unmodified opinion of this financial trends report, similar to how the audit was presented earlier. So thank you to your staff too, Andrew, very much. And of course, Pam, to all staff for how this is prepared, how easily digestible it is, and I mean, transparent it is as a result for anybody who cares to go through. One question that I do want just a reminder on, Mr. Hune, page 17 talks about the municipal property tax rate comparison. Are there any municipalities that we are listed up against in that bar graph that include their public library within their property tax rates as shown on this graph?
Right. We don't include the library rate in this analysis. Our goal is to show the general fund operating rate for those jurisdictions, and not the library, because it kind of see it as a separate entity. So we pull that out for everybody.
Yeah. Okay. So no libraries for any of them.
Correct.
Right. Yep. Okay. All right, with that, I'll reiterate the thanks again, and that was the only question I had.
And I guess since I have a moment here, before we transition to Mr. Nord, I do appreciate, and it's my privilege to present this information and to receive your thanks. But it feels kind of awkward for me because my staff do a great deal of this work. I look at it closely, and then it goes through Pam and Eric for their criteria and their analysis. So this is I get to say thank you for the thank yous, but it truly is a deep team effort, all the way to Supervisor, to City Manager Reese, who challenges our staff and me on these numbers all the time to make sure they're accurate and presented well. So thank you, I appreciate that, but it's not just me. is what I'm saying.
Seeing no further discussion on this, we will move to council comments and concerns prior to an adjournment. I'm going to start with a couple myself. The first is I'm suggesting a change in public comment procedures. And my recommendation is that public comment be divided into two sections. The first section would be public comment germane to the business that we're doing the night of that comment. As the council meeting is a business meeting, that public comment should reflect that piece of business. And then prior to council concerns at the end of the agenda, I'm recommending that we have public comment covering anything people want to talk about regarding the town of Normal. So loosening up our public comment process. The time would still be 30 minutes, 3 minutes of comment. And so there will be times when there are issues that are very strong that that 30 minutes might be consumed by the items on the agenda. And conversely, there might not be any comment on items on the agenda and a lot of comment afterwards. So that's how I'm recommending we open up our public comment a little bit more. We've been criticized a lot because we hold it to the agenda. So I'm recommending we loosen that criteria and give people an opportunity to talk about the town of Normal issues that may be not on the agenda that night. Two other items, both of them a very strong concern for me. The first is public comments on social media that Mr. Nord made about me personally as the mayor of this town. Very strong accusation that I do not allow him to speak or ask questions of staff. And it is true that I shut him down in the last meeting, the public meeting. And that was because, and I probably should have been clearer on that, that's because those questions have been asked multiple times by Mr. Nord and answered multiple times by Mr. Day. So the questions were asked and answered, and that's the reason I shut that down at that time. To insinuate that I'm going to control the meeting and not let people talk about issues at hand is disingenuous and not true and not fair. So I wasn't going to bring that up until somebody pointed out that there was a strong misrepresentation of my actions in that meeting. The second issue is in the special meeting, we had two ordinances, both dealing with COVID-19. And there was spirited discussion back and forth on those ordinances. And both ordinances passed on a 6-to-1 vote. The one issue that came up again from Mr. Nord in public comment was he did not agree with those ordinances, and he elucidated his disagreement with the issue of gatherings of 10 people or more and our reaction to that. And he did not agree with that, and it's his right to not agree with that. But I was very surprised that he suggested to the public ways to subvert that ordinance or work around that ordinance. An ordinance that was approved by 6 people to 1 person on this council. So I'm going to ask you, Mr. Nord, what was your thought process on why, when something is so overwhelmingly approved by this council, that you would go to the public and suggest ways to subvert and go around those ordinances?
I'm sorry, I didn't realize that council concerns was open for discussion because we've had that conversation before. If you'd like me to answer, I will. I just want to note that.
Noted.
Okay. The Constitution does say that we cannot restrict the right for people to organize. And that was what I said at the meeting. And when people ask me why I said no, that is exactly what I said.
Ms. Smith, do you have a comment or a concern?
Yes, on a different topic. On September 15th, the Bloomington Normal Parks and Recreation that provides opportunities for citizens with special needs has their registration beginning for their fall program. And they won't let me share the screen. So I am reduced to holding this up in front of my camera. So I am using this platform as an opportunity to remind all the households that have someone that benefits from those programs to check your mailbox, check your emails to see if you've received a copy of this brochure. They are making every effort to expand their offerings. I know that you may feel still some conflict over whether or not it is safe to participate in some programs. I would encourage you to contact SOAR and ask questions about that. There are reduced limits to satisfy the restrictions on assembling a certain number of people under our COVID restrictions. So there are fewer opportunities for people, but despite that, in speaking with one of the personnel from SOAR, they did not have some offerings fill. And so I would encourage you to take advantage of these programs if this is something that would benefit a member of your household. It is a wonderful opportunity, and it goes a long way in providing an outlet, a social outlet to a population much in need of that. Thank you.
Motion for adjournment.
So moved. So moved. Second.
Oh, Mr. Bird, we'll let you.
And Mayor, if I could jump in before council concludes the evening, I would like to make an introduction of a new staff member at the end. So.
Okay, Mr. Nord, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I did. Let me find my sheet. So when we had our planning meeting last year, the workshop, and then we had our citizen summit, we had talked about having another citizen summit in advance of the budget and our workshop. And, you know, we've got the citizens that have said that they would, you know, like more engagement, more involvement. And, you know, I thought it was good that we had the citizen summit. And I think we should look at scheduling that because time is, well, the budget process is starting here soon. And we should give the citizens a chance to be a part of this decision and the discussion because this is their money that we're spending and they should have some input in not only how we spend the money, but also the direction of the town. And we talked about doing this. So I think we should get this scheduled, let the public know, so that way we have some sort of continuity of events so we don't lose what we had started and have to start this process from anew. So I request that, you know, the town manager schedule this so we can start notifying the public so that way they can make plans, because we were all there and people were thankful that we did it. So thank you and have a good night.
Mr. Nord, I would say that there has been discussion about exactly that item, to have a citizen summit. And we realize that that was a valuable tool for input. I think our concern was what does that look like in a COVID world, and how can we accommodate the citizens? So that's the conundrum we're facing right now. The notion that we would be in the community activity center with 100 people in a COVID world is just not realistic. So this is something we've got to figure out, and staff is indeed working on that and talking with people about how we can do that.
Sure, and that's great, because I've talked with other communities or other folks that are doing this in other communities, and they've figured out a way to do it through Zoom type meetings too. So I'm thankful. Thank you.
I'm glad to hear that, because we had just talked about a planning commission meeting trying to wrap up a public hearing process, and you had a very different opinion on bringing people together. So we will find a way. I've been talking with the mayor about citizen engagement, and there's got to be some solutions to that. So I appreciate your reminder, Mr. Nord.
Mr. McCarthy, you had a comment?
I do, thanks. I forgot to put up my hand initially. I'll keep it brief though. I wanted to draw attention to one thing going on in the town right now, is that the town is seeking public comment on a draft of the bike and pedestrian master plan. It's going on right now through September 18th. In our virtual world, Mercy Davison, the town planner, is taking comment. You can reach her directly. You can see the post on the town Facebook page also if you're looking to find ways to give input to the bike and pedestrian master plan. It's always great to have lots of citizen input, and we've had that in the past. So that's number one. Number two is, I don't want to end on a down note, but since we've taken action on our COVID-19 related ordinances from our special meeting last week, our numbers and positivity rates have skyrocketed in our community. And I'm just urging anybody who's watching, and anybody, if our media folks report on this, is that please, whether you believe science or not, put on your mask. Do it for our businesses that are struggling. If the governor comes here and imposes more strict rules because of what's happening in our community, it's only going to hurt our small businesses. So please social distance. Don't go to places if you don't have to. Small gatherings, please get tested and just put on a mask anytime you're outside your house. And please do it for the good of our local economy, our local businesses, and everybody else. Thanks very much.
And Ms. Reese, we'll go to you to close it out.
Thank you, Mayor. And actually, before I close it out with an introduction of Ms. Olafson, I do have a couple of things I want to highlight for council and for citizens awareness. The McLean County Regional Planning Commission is working with the Illinois Housing Development Authority to host listening sessions on a housing survey. And so I'm going to encourage people to get on the website called IllinoisHousingBlueprint.org. It's ILHousingBlueprint.org. There's a housing survey, and that information is being used by the Illinois Housing Development Authority. So we're encouraging participation in that. The second thing I would like to just highlight is it is still census time. The census numbers are still coming in. We encourage everyone to go online, fill out their census information. Census takers, census information collectors will be wrapping up on September 30th. So we are in the last few weeks of the census, and it is very important. Hopefully everybody remembers to go online and do that. And lastly, I want to formally introduce to council our new Director of Communications and Community Relations, and that is Kathy Olafson. Kathy has been participating in your meetings. She was at the special meeting, but was behind her name. Her video wasn't on, but Ms. Olafson has joined the team. We're very pleased to have her on board, and I just wanted to formally introduce her since you haven't yet met her in person. So, Ms. Olafson?
Hello, Council. It's my honor to be here with you tonight, and look forward to serving with you.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Ms. Cummings,
Aye.
Mr. Nord,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we are adjourned. Thank you.